Yo, Kip Guy here. What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to talk to you guys about how you can calibrate your TV right now by yourself without any kind of professional calibration. But I do want to leave a small disclaimer. We're not going to go through every single feature in your picture settings because a lot of that is over a lot of people's heads. You need certain tools to be able to measure. It's not something we want to get into, but we're going to go through the settings that each and every one of your TVs have that will make a vast improvement in your picture. So before we get started, let's talk about why it's important to calibrate your picture quality. Right now, 4K is more available than ever. It's easy to access. It's relatively cheap in comparison to when it first came out. And it's it's a popular format for movies and video games now, and some TV is starting to be streamed in 4K. Netflix is coming in 4K, all that stuff. So it's really easy to obtain now for not a lot of money. And so more than likely, you have a 4K TV in your home or a 1080p that gives really good picture quality in your home right now. So you really want to get your money's worth. When you open up a TV and you plug it in and you turn it on, there's a lot of things that are just set wrong in your TV. And most people will notice it, some people may not, but there's a lot of picture issues that come out of the box. A lot of times when TVs are unboxed and put into your homes, they're set in like a demo mode or some kind of, bright TV store mode, whatever it is, and just to make things look bright and pop out and grab your attention. But that's not really what you want to have in your home. There are certain settings in the TV that need to be turned off or adjusted or changed or raised or lowered to really give your TV the best chance of performing at its best. So we're going to go into the LG C1 and we're going to go through how I like to calibrate my TV just with the basic features. I have mine professionally calibrated, but we're going to go in and show you guys how to do yours at home. Alright guys, so we are in the picture settings on the LG C1. And so I want you guys to kind of follow me as we go through this. I'm trying to make it as quick and easy as possible. Don't want to bore you guys too much. But the first thing that I want you guys to do when you go into your TV settings, I want you to go to your picture mode where you can select like vivid, cinematic, movie, game, whatever that section is on your TV. Go to that section and I want you to click on either movie mode or cinema mode, or if you're using LG, go to one of the expert brights or dark, depending on how much light is in your room, or more times than not. Choose either one of those four: cinema, movie, or if you're LG, expert, bright, or dark. And that's going to give you the most accurate color and skin tones and sharpness and such out of the box that you can get before calibration. A lot of these other ones that are like vivid, or if you have like cinematic or something like that, sports, game optimizer, standard, these tend to be on the far side of the scale, one way or the other, too warm or too cool, too bright or too dim, too sharp, whatever it is. It's just too much of something, too much color, whatever it is. So cinema or movie mode, whatever you have, puts you at the best chance to get the best picture out of the box before calibration. This also turns off a lot of the stuff we don't want on. So make sure you do that first. And once you've done that, go back to where you can set your brightness and color and stuff like that next. Before we go into these features, what I need you to turn off next is adaptive brightness. Adaptive brightness takes a look at your room and the ambient light that's around the TV. And depending on how much light is in the room at the time, the TV will raise the overall brightness of the screen so that you can see better in the day, and then lower the brightness at night so it doesn't strain your eyes. Well, we don't want that on because it it changes a lot of different things from you. We don't want it deciding the picture quality for you. We want it to be set, especially when we're going to set our brightness. So we don't want the TV auto raising and lowering on its own. So turn off adaptive brightness or whatever you have, whatever it's called. Once you've done that, we want to go through these different settings here. Again, we're not going to go through all of these in here because a lot of them are over our heads. A lot of them require some tools of measurement. So we're going to go through what every TV has. And we're going to start off with brightness. Now, people have a misconception on what brightness is. Brightness is not how bright your TV is. Brightness is how deep those blacks look on the screen. So these are my settings right now, and I took a picture of all this so that I don't mess up my own settings here. But brightness here is how dark or light dark images look. Like, for example, this screen right here, how black are those blacks? We want to get this to the point where you can still see detail in your blacks, and that you still can see something in a horror movie, a dark room. You can still make out a person in a dark room or a figure without going too dark.
Now, the brighter you raise this, or the higher you raise this setting here, the lighter the blacks will be. So you may be able to see a little bit in a darker scene, but don't make it too bright to where it looks washed out. So for example, this is a perfect image on the screen here. I can see the street and the lines and everything in that street. It was dark, you can tell it's night, but there still was detail in some of those darker corners, in some of the darkest parts underneath that bridge. This image here is a good example too. You can still see the darkness of the ground between the buildings, but you still see that it's a bright evening day there right now in that city of Dubai, which is what we're looking at now. So go through your brightness and lower it down until you can't see. Put a movie on and lower it down until you can't see a person in the darkness, and then raise it up until you can start to see some detail, and then you're probably where you need to be for the most part. This is another good example. You can see the streets lit up completely, but you also have a good view at the city. You can see that the buildings are completely dim. There's no lighting. You can see the reflections in the windows there, but at the same time, you can obviously tell it's a dark night. You can still see everything just fine, at least from my point of view here. So once you've done that setting, brightness, we want to go down and get our color correct. Now, I recommend going to a human being. Maybe a Caucasian person is honestly easier to use. On the color depth or color, you want to, most people like to crank this up and get as much color as you can, but that's actually inaccurate. A lot of times whenever you bump up your color, you add a lot of warmth and uncharacterized features in people and animations and characters. You actually don't want to raise this too high. Color obviously increases the hue, adds a little bit of vibrancy, but you don't want to put too much. So find a human, a Caucasian male or female or whatever, and you want to lower it all the way down until they look completely washed out, pale, gray, whatever, and then slowly start to bring that back until they look more natural, until you can see some of the blemishes on the skin, till you bring back some of the pigment before it turns too red. Once it gets too red, then you're too high. So bring it back down until it looks natural, until it looks like somebody you're actually talking to in person. And once you get around there, once it looks believable, then leave it there, because you're probably pretty close to where it needs to be anyway. Don't lower it too much to where it looks bland, it looks gray. There's no vibrancy to it, but don't turn it up too much to where skin tones start to look orange or a little bit red, a little too warm. You got to get that correct, because that's probably one of the more important things to get right, is your brightness and your color. So moving on to sharpness here on my television, you have the ability to adjust your sharpness in your TV. Now this one's actually one of the easier ones to set. What I want you to do is find an object like a leaf or a box or anything stagnant that you can pause on a person or whatever. And what you're going to do is you're going to crank the sharpness all the way up. And what you're going to see is you're going to see like a ring or a halo effect around the outer perimeter of whatever object you're using for reference. So if I had, let's say I had a leaf on the screen here, you would see, if I turn it all the way up, you'll see that that leaf will have a halo around it, kind of like a white line kind of tracing it. That means your sharpness is way too high. It's way too high. So you want to start to take it from the top and start to lower it down until that halo effect around objects disappears. And once you can't see that halo effect, then you're set. You're pretty good. So your sharpness is not too much, but it retains a lot of that detail, brings back some of the features and detail, small details, and like a leaf and like a hair follicle, skin tone, hair on the arms. You're perfect at that point. So take your sharpness and you want to raise it up all the way to the maximum. And you're going to start to see a really bad halo around a lot of objects. And then once you see that halo, back it down until you stop. And then you've been set up with a good sharpness. Now we're off to contrast. And contrast is a fun one. And this is not too hard to set either. Contrast is the contrast, no pun intended, the contrast between light and dark. And so I have on the screen here an image of a tomato against a black background. And what this is showing you is that on the right side, it's completely dark. On the middle side is the vibrant orange. And then on the right or the left side, it's the green, okay? So darker colors are bright red against a black screen. What you want to do is crank this pretty much all the way up. You're going to want contrast to be pretty high. Not all the way to max, but go ahead and start with max. And what you're going to see is you're going to start to see whites become a lot whiter. Is what it really controls. Brightness controls how bright the blacks are, how deep or how light the blacks are. Contrast controls how bright and how peaky your whites are. Usually when you have your contrast too high, things seem really washed out, almost like there's like a light being shined on somebody's face that's really, really bright. You want to back this down until, again, the lighting looks natural. Again, contrast controls how bright the whites are on a picture. And so as you see, as I start to turn contrast down, we start to lose a lot of vibrancy and picture in pretty much the whole screen. As you start to raise it up, it starts to become a little more natural. Now, when you raise it too high, it starts to become really highlighted. I'll show you here on the screen. These whites here start to overtake some of the picture quality of the tomato. This starts to glow just a little too much. And as you start to back it down more natural, it starts to balance itself out with the rest of the color spectrum. So it's probably easier to set this on a bright background. So let me change the image to a brighter background so you guys can see what it looks like on a bright screen.
All right, so now we are going to look at a lighter image. This is just some rocks, debris. It's a good mixture of lights and darks here. On this particular image, it's blurred on the top and on the bottom there. So in the middle, we're going to focus there because it's a little more in focus on the picture. But we're going to go back to contrast now. We're going to set contrast using a bright image. So we're going to go back to advanced settings, down, what was it, to brightness, I think, and then adjust contrast. So we're going to lower all the way down. And as you can see, as this starts to become obviously a little bit darker, but a little less detailed too. So my whites that are in this image are not as bright. So some of the pebbles that were in the picture here, some of the pebbles here start to fade into the background because those are my lighter subjects. And as I lower the brightness, I start to lose a lot of detail and a lot of white in my image. As I start to raise it more and more, you start to lose even more detail because now everything's kind of blending together. Everything's just too washed out. So you want to find a middle ground here. Typically, you want your contrast to be pretty high. If it's from 0 to 100, you probably want it to be in the 80s on most televisions. Use what your eye says looks good at the end of the day, but you're probably going to want to be on the higher end of the spectrum here in the 80s or something close to that, 70s, no less than probably 70 for most televisions. But what you're looking for is just make sure that anything that's bright white, like these little pebbles here, if you guys can see those kind of stick out to you because that's the lighter part of the image. That's what the contrast is really controlling, is the overall whiteness in the screen here, trying to keep everything uniform. You want your blacks to be rich, but you want your whites to be rich too, but you want to keep that detail so that they complement each other. So try to play around with that and do what your eye says is best, but overall that's what you kind of want to do here. Now, as you guys can see here, I have auto dynamic contrast off. That's that auto brightness, auto contrast. We don't want anything automatically happening for us. We want our picture to stay consistent at all times, so that no matter what we're watching, we have a consistent picture throughout all of our media, whether that's streaming, whether that's Blu-ray, whether that's normal TV, SDR, HDR, 4K, 10 or 1440, whatever it is, it's going to be consistent. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for how to kind of calibrate your TV on your own. Now, of course, I'm not any kind of expert. I don't know everything about all the settings and exactly what they do and how to really get in there and fine tune it. But this is like just a general idea, kind of how to, fine tune it for what you want to do. A lot of people don't necessarily like to calibrate their TVs, or most people don't even bother with getting a professional in. But if you want to get a little more out of your television, if you want to get as much dollar out of your TV as you can, it's worth it to go in and kind of change a few things and make sure things are as set as good as possible. If you don't do anything at all, at least change your TV off of a vivid mode, off of a brightness mode, off of demo mode, whatever. Get back into like cinematic or movie, whatever it's called. Get into an IFS expert mode if you're on LG or Samsung, something like that, so that you get the best color accuracy, you get the best brightness. They turn off a lot of the soap opera type, soapbox stuff. A lot of those features that you have on your TV, like eco mode, you don't need those on. It just degrades your image. It adds a lag time for those who are gaming. So a lot of those features you don't need. So go in, dive in. Don't be afraid to go in and take a look at some stuff. And most likely, guys, there's a lot of TV reviewers out there who do a lot better job about this than I do, who will give you actual settings for your TV. Now, I don't recommend copying people's settings because not every panel is equal, and obviously not every room is the same. So use it as reference, but don't necessarily copy it. But with that being said, guys, leave me a comment down below and tell me, how do you calibrate your TV? Do you use calibration DVDs? Do you call professional? Do you do it on your own? Let me know that down below in the comment section. Hit that like button and subscribe if you are not already. We will see you in the next video. K-Pace Guy out. Peace.